My name is Tony Henderson. I'm currently retired, but prior to the 31st of March, I was the Community Transport Advisor for Environment Canterbury. And in Environment Canterbury, community transport involves total mobility and rural transport, or transport for rural towns, which is mostly community vehicle trusts. How do we operate this? Right, just a geography update for you. Canterbury is a very big region. It stretches from Kaikoura, north of Kaikoura, right down to the Waitaki Valley, and from the coast right through to the Southern Alps. There are two main areas where people need to go for important appointments, medical or commercial, and that's Christchurch, obviously, and Timaru. And everywhere else, people need to travel. And like all other rural communities in New Zealand, the rural towns are diminishing. All the services are being centralised, and the people who need to live in those towns, or have lived there all their life, they are getting older. They are facing life with fewer and fewer facilities, and the need for transport is getting more and more important. And when they get to the stage where they can't transport themselves, then they have a problem. So the first vehicle trust started in Canterbury in 1988, and that was based in Rangiora, and that one is still going. Not long after that, two more were established, one in Geraldine and one in Waimate, and so those three vehicle trusts have been operating for nearly 30 years each. Nothing else happened. No more development occurred until 2012. So there's a big gap from the start to when the next one started in 2012. And when I helped start the fourth trust in 2012, and when I retired in 2018, we were up to 15 vehicle trusts in Canterbury. And all of those locations are where we have vehicle trusts operating in Canterbury. So the Canterbury Regional Council has recognised all of those problems and has put in their Canterbury Regional Transport Plan, there's a policy on community transport services, and there's a part which looks at providing community transport. And so I have summarised this, and so the Canterbury Regional Council will help support community vehicle trusts where there is no alternative public transport or taxi service available, and this is becoming increasingly more relevant today. Most of those towns have a service of some sort a few years ago. Now they don't. It's just the way the economy is going. The second thing is there must be a recognised need for the transport, and I don't know why that's in there, because there is a need. We all know there's a need. Everybody needs to be transported. There is community support, and this is important because this model that we work on is similar to what Kim and Bill and Alicia and Debbie were talking about. It relies on volunteers, and if the community is willing to support a trust, then the Regional Council will also. They put a catch-all there that there is sufficient funding available to establish a trust, and that the trust has the support of a territorial authority. As you know, regional councils have a regional responsibility, but they need to work in with the territorial authority, and so they need to have some support for that group. Now, what sort of support does the Canterbury Regional Council provide? Well, first of all, most importantly, they provide an annual grant. The grant in previous years, or early on, varied quite considerably, and I'm not quite sure what sort of formula was used in the times before I started, and nobody seemed to know how the grant was decided. But in recent times, the last few, most of the trusts that I've been involved with, the annual grant has been $10,000 a year. So the trust would apply to the Regional Council for that money at the time of establishment. It would go through the annual planning process, and then it would be approved. If it was approved, and all of them have been approved, and the ones that I've been involved with anyway, they get that grant annually. In the funding policy of the Regional Council, there is a process for reviewing grants, but none of them have been reviewed in the time that I was involved. So this is, I think this is seen that the amount of money that comes from the Regional Council is very well spent and very well used. Secondly, the Regional Council provides some administrative support in the set-up phase for vehicle trusts. It's for somebody starting out new and starting up a trust, there is a bit of a maze or a minefield to go through, and it's quite difficult for a community group, a rural community group to set something up. But I've now been involved in the establishment of 13 vehicle trusts, and so my time was given to the trust to help set in the setup phase, and then it carries on once the trust is formed for ongoing support. And Environment Canterbury actually provides a staff member, and up until March it was me, who would actually sit on in the board meetings of all the trusts to provide advice, support, and to be a connector between the various trusts. Environment Canterbury also provides support in providing accounting services, and this came about, those of you who have been involved in the voluntary sector for a while will know that charities services changed their policy with regard to annual accounting a few years ago, where they required minimum standards of accounts to be provided annually. Prior to that, charities could put in whatever form of accounts that they had. Some were just a handwritten cash book, some were a spreadsheet, and some had a fancy accounting package. Well, about 4 years ago, charities said, no more, we want minimum standards. So at that stage, we had 11 or 12 vehicle trusts, and I put it to Environment Canterbury to say, well, why don't we take the initiative here and pay for a subscription to zero, and that each trust will have its own set of accounts within that. So Environment Canterbury pays for that annual subscription, and each trust then sets up its own accounts within that. And it's a very good system, because one of the dangers of the old system was that normally the treasurer would have the information on their own computer. They'd take along some, if they thought about it, reports to the board meeting. The board would rely very much on the integrity of their treasurer, and in most cases they were fine, but sometimes they weren't. Whereas now with an online or an accounting system which is in the cloud, more than one person in that trust has access to those accounts. So the treasurer, obviously, also the chairman, and maybe the secretary or whatever, and also I had access to any accounts if I ever needed to. But what that does is it provides a standard that all the boards are getting the right sort of information they need. Each year, Environment Canterbury organises an annual networking meeting for all the vehicle trusts, where they get together and talk about their issues and problems and successes. And they host a website which all of the vehicle trusts have a page on, and you might like to have a look at it at some stage. It's communityvehicletrust.org.nz, and you'll come up with a map which, similar to that one I had on before. You just click on it and it takes you to that vehicle trust, and it tells you what they do. And there are other pages within that the various trusts can communicate amongst each other, and it's a very good way of maintaining contact. In terms of administration, there is an MOU, a Memorandum of Understanding, between each trust and Environment Canterbury. And that just sets out the relationship between the trust and the Regional Council. There's no contract as such. Each trust is autonomous, self-governing, but there is a relationship between the Regional Council and the trust, and that's set out in that MOU. Each trust is required to provide some monthly reporting, and I've always been very concerned that we kept the bureaucracy to a minimum. But we know that when public money is being spent, there are requirements for giving information and accountability. So going back to the setting up, providing the accounting package, we know that the financial accountability is being looked after because charities are having an oversight of the finances, but at a standard that we are aware of and we have also have access to it. So we're really looking at accounting or providing information on the physical work, and so the monthly requirements is just the number of passengers carried, the kilometres travelled, and the number of volunteer hours. So each month the trust put that, and they actually enter it into a page at the back of the website, which the public can't see. Each month they just put that information in, and it automatically churns out a master report for Environment Canterbury. Now, as far as the community vehicle trusts are concerned, they're all community owned and operated. They're all registered charitable trusts, so therefore they are a legal entity in their own right. They're governed by local boards of trustees. The trust owns and operates the vehicles, and volunteers drive the vehicles for the trust, as I mentioned before, and passengers pay a fee to cover the cost of the trip. Now that fare is determined by the board, and in some cases it's almost 100% covered by the board. We have one trust that charges $2 per journey no matter where they go, but we have others who can't afford that, so the customers do pay a fare, and each has its own methodology for working out what the community can actually cover. So just to go to the fare structure, in general the cost per passenger is no greater than as if they were transporting themselves in their own car. So that's the very maximum that the person would pay. But most trusts subsidise that to some extent. For example, we'll have a vehicle trust in Twizel. It's a 2-hour journey to Timaru and 2 hours back, and so they're charging something like $50 return. Well, they can't run a car for that, so they're having to subsidise the rest of it. The same from Kaikoura. It's 2.5 hours journey from Kaikoura to Christchurch, and so their trips are subsidised to help the clients get there. But there are others that are closer in, and like for Geraldine, for example, which is only 25 kilometres from Timaru, they'll charge $15 return, and people can pay for that. So each trust works out its own fare structure to suit the people that live in their own area. And if a trust does need to subsidise it, then they need to raise additional funding to cover that. Now I mentioned that Environment Canterbury provides a grant. Whilst we don't actually stipulate too loudly what that grant is to be spent on, what we encourage is that one of the key attributes or key characteristics is that this service must be sustainable into the future, and that once the trust is up and running, they are encouraged to use the grant money for vehicle replacement, so that, because we have had situations where a trust has been operating for some time, they've been working well, all of a sudden they found they need to replace a vehicle and they've got no money to do that. So each trust is encouraged to have its own business plan where they put aside so much money each year to replace vehicles, and they're encouraged to use the grant money for that purpose, although that's not specified. Oh, okay, 2 minutes, right. Now, I mentioned that each trust puts in monthly reports, and here's a wee bit of a summary of the last financial year's report.